Phil Jusino Show coming at you from Strathmore Studios. Got a great show planned for tonight. I'm calling it All Things Criminal. Let me just ask you a couple of questions before we get to the lineup. Was a man cleared of murder because of the position of the moon? Did actor-comedian Larry David actually save the life of a man on death row? And lastly, how real is My Cousin Vinny? If you're watching this show, I'm pretty sure you've seen My Cousin Vinny. Who hasn't? You'd have to be under a rock. Or maybe some very young person who just never saw the movie. Now let's get to the segments. The first segment is Lincoln's Almanac Trial, Almanac Murder Trial. The second one is Larry David saves the life of a man on death row. And the third one is, again, how real is My Cousin Vinny? Is it all Hollywood? Are there some things in there that are realistic? I'm a criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, and I can say, yes, there are things in there that are real, and there are things that are in there that are not. And we're going to get to that. That's the third segment. So stick around. I think you're going to learn a lot tonight. It'll be interesting, and I'd like you to comment, and I'll get to see your comments. My producer, Dan Jusino, will also get to see that. So let's start with something that a lot of people might not realize, that Abraham Lincoln was an excellent trial attorney. He was not just President of the United States, our 16th president, and arguably our best president, although President Trump may disagree with you, or disagree with that sentiment. But let's talk about a murder trial that he had. Now, go back to August of 1857. A man named Armstrong was accused of murder. He was accused of murdering James Metzner, and he bludgeoned him to death. That was the gist of it. It was some kind of weird, the way it was described as some kind of weird implement, but he bludgeoned the guy to death a few minutes before midnight on August 29th, 1857. Lucky for Armstrong, Abraham Lincoln, who was an attorney at the time, he was always an attorney until his death, but he was a practicing attorney, not a politician. He took the case for free because Armstrong's father and he were friends. So he takes the case, and at the trial, a witness named Charles Allen testifies that he's about 150 feet away from where the murder took place, and he sees it. He witnesses the murder. That's the prosecution's case. That's the prosecution's witness. On cross-examination, that's when the other side gets to question the witness of the other side, and he asks him, how did you witness that? It's dark out. It's a few minutes from midnight. You're 150 feet away. How did you witness that murder? And his answer was, and this is a quote, by the light of the moon. So he's saying, because of the moon, I was able to see the murder. Now remember, this is 1857, so you don't have street lights, not like we have. You might have some candles or something along those lines. You're not going to have a flashlight. You're not going to have a headlamp. Like when I go walking in my neighborhood, I have actually a headlamp on so people see me and I can see them. That didn't exist back in 1857. So Lincoln sets the stage. How did you... Now, I presume Abraham Lincoln knew what that man was going to say. I know it. Because any attorney will tell you, you don't, sometimes you take a gamble, you have no choice, but you don't ask questions you don't know the answers to. Now, in a criminal case, unlike, let's say, a divorce or a car accident, there's no depositions. So you're just hearing from the witness, unless they gave a written statement. I don't know if he did or not, but Lincoln said how? By the light of the moon. So Lincoln produced the 1857 Almanac, which is like the Bible back then, still is to some extent. Farmers go by it. And he shows it to the jury. He asks the judge to take judicial notice of it. Judicial notice means you're saying to the judge, look, this is not in dispute. This is a fact. Like if someone says, Judge, let the record show, please take judicial notice that March 25th, 2026 is a Wednesday. The judge could say, okay, that's not in dispute. And he take judicial notice. The judge allowed Lincoln to show the pages dealing with August, which is when the murder happened in 1857. The trial was in 1858. and he said that the moon was the waning moon, and it was a thin moon. My words, but the way they described the moon, it wasn't a full moon. So this was presented to the jury, and the jury acquitted him. He was found not guilty. What's interesting is someone might ask, well, how do we know that the almanac is reliable? Well, nowadays, and I don't know how it was back then, there's a standard that a judge has to follow. In New York, it's the Fry standard. The federal, it's the Daubert. And you can't just, if you just said, oh, there's a new technology, it'll show that the guy's guilty. No, it doesn't automatically come in as evidence. At one time, fingerprints might have been in that category in their infancy, or even DNA. Now DNA is widely accepted. You can use DNA in just about any trial. You have to lay the foundation, but it's acceptable in just about every trial.
I have a question. You were talking about the Fry. What is the difference between that and
okay, the Fry test is what New York follows. The Daubert is what the federal courts. So a federal crime, Daubert. Daubert is more flexible. It gives the judge more leeway to allow something into evidence, where with the Fry test, is it generally accepted within the scientific community, Daniel?
Okay.
So if the scientific community says, oh, we buy that hook, line, and sinker, that line or that evidence or that science is accepted. I'll give you an example. I once heard of a murder case or someone being found guilty because they were able to test bugs at a particular site, and it showed when the murder happened. Again, it's pretty complicated, but they were able to use that. Now, let's say the scientific community said, oh, that's hogwash. We don't follow that. It would not be allowed under the Fry standard. Under the Daubert standard, a federal judge could say, you know what? In this particular case, I will accept it. So it's a lighter standard, the Daubert, in a federal case. New York doesn't follow that. So the point I'm making is just because Lincoln said, let's use the almanac, it didn't mean the judge had to take judicial notice, for one. And not everything a judge takes judicial notice of. A judge can say, no, I don't take judicial notice. You can present it to the jury, but I'm not going to take judicial notice.
Is there a standard that they have to follow in order to submit something that's showing the science behind what they're trying to present?
Yes, and that's the standard. So, again, a lot of things are generally accepted, but if it's something new, there would have to be a hearing. Believe it or not, there would be a hearing before the trial. Just like there could be a hearing on the admissibility of eyewitness identification or something along those lines. You have like a map hearing or a Wade hearing. There's different hearings that you have where the jury is not even impaneled yet, where they're just waiting in the wings, usually not impaneled.
How does that affect juries if they don't really understand that science? Is that up to the
It's up to the expert. So, for instance, I have a trial coming up where I'm going to call an expert to educate the trier of fact. It could be a judge. It could be a jury. So to answer your question, Dan, so in New York, there are certain things like fingerprint testimony evidence, DNA evidence, tire tracks evidence, certain sound, ballistics. Those are all generally accepted. At one time, they were new. But let's say something comes out of left field tomorrow. And remember like mitochondrial DNA, or they use DNA because ancestry DNA, you could trace it back
that came into play
and say, oh, it's his brother. It's the person who committed this murder is related to this guy. And it narrows things down for the prosecution. The same that happened in Idaho. That's how they got the guy. They had DNA, but he hadn't been convicted of a crime before, so he wasn't in the database. But they had a feeling who it might be, and then when they knew it was related to this person, and he was related to that person, it kind of linked it up, and that's admissible. At one time it wasn't admissible, but now it is. So the judge has to, and it's not the jury's decision. The judge decides whether or not something comes in. The jury then decides whether it's persuasive enough to say, okay, we believe the almanac. So therefore, he couldn't have witnessed it because he's 150 yards away, just like in the movie My Cousin Vinny, which we're going to get to, remember? Mrs. Riley and only Mrs. Riley. How many fingers am I holding up? he was able to show that because of her poor eyesight, she was not able to see that distance, to see that it was the two boys, in the movie My Cousin Vinny. So that evidence is presented. In this case, it was very simple. The probably farmers out there believe it, and he was acquitted. But that's important to analyze the standard.
Would you say that was a risky maneuver to hold up the fingers?
Yes, absolutely. Come on, we're going to get to that. All right, you're stealing my thunder.
I have one. What about in Better Call Saul when he has the? Remember, I'm sure you've seen that. I'm sure when he has the person sitting in the courtroom and he has the person point out the person, and it's not actually him.
Yes, I think the judge would declare a mistrial if it was assuming there was a jury there, and that's kind of dirty pool.
Wouldn't that be in favor of the defense though? Wouldn't you want a mistrial or?
Well, if I'm the prosecution and that just happened, it submarined my case because the jury's going to say, wait a minute, he picked out the wrong guy. So if I'm the prosecution, and a mistrial can mean maybe he walks, so you got to be careful.
We gotta do a whole series on breaking Better Call Saul.
We should do that, like when he said, "Pay me $1." To Walter White.
Yeah, right when he was about to get shot.
There's a whole thing behind that. So in the Lincoln one, again, Lincoln was a great trial attorney. In fact, he represented corporations, the railroads and all that. But he also had some great trials. And just a little backstory, I read this years ago, and I used it in one of my criminal trials. It wasn't, in one of my criminal cases. It wasn't a trial, but I was able to use the information in the almanac regarding the moon to convince the prosecutor that the witness was not reliable. And I was able to avoid a trial. It wasn't a murder case. It wasn't a big trial like with Lincoln. But I was able to use that to my advantage. And I got a favorable result for my client. So it's a good attorney is using, a great attorney in this case, Lincoln, using resources at his disposal. I had a spoofing case one time, and I was able to show 2 sets of records. There was an inconsistency, and I got a not guilty verdict after a jury trial. That's for another day. I don't think we're going to have time to go into that. So let's go. I don't know if you have any questions on that, Dan, before I leave this segment.
I don't want to derail with a couple of my questions, so if we do circle back, I have a couple.
All right, but I'm saying if anything in the anyone in the audience has any questions, let me know.
Yes.
Now, let's go to camera 1 for a second. We all have heard, I shouldn't say we all have, but many of us have heard of Larry David. He's the co-writer for Seinfeld, brilliant comedian, very funny guy. I've never seen him do stand-up, but he's very funny. And he has a show that was on for a number of years called Curb Your Enthusiasm. I didn't really get into this show, but after I read about this, and I did this segment once when I was doing FM radio, and I think I did it also on TV, and I heard about him saving someone from death row, and I said, Larry David? He's not an attorney. How could that have happened? But he did, and we're going to get to that right now. So let's go to camera 2. Larry David, the comedian and actor, was the reason why a man did not go to his death, to the either the electric chair or the gas chamber in California. Now, very quickly, 1972, the California Supreme Court outlawed, not the United States, they outlawed the death penalty in California. A few months later, I think it was like 4 or 5 months later, the legislature overturned that with legislation, which you can do, and they put back the death penalty. In 2019, and it wasn't really used widely, Gavin Newsom put forth a moratorium. So there haven't been any murders, there haven't been any murderers put to death. But so go back to 2003, and a guy named Mario Catalan is convicted of murder. He's a gangbanger, and he's convicted of murder. The key witness was named Martha Puebla, 16-year-old girl. So after the trial, she testifies, Mario's convicted, he's in jail, California. And Puebla is then killed. She's shot to death in daylight. And the person arrested is named Juan Catalan. Juan Catalan is the brother of Mario Catalan. So right away, there's a motive, right? Revenge. And people point him out. They say, that's the guy. He's arrested. He's thrown in jail. Couldn't make bail. And he sits there for a while. He has a legal aid attorney, and the legal aid attorney is doing all he can for him. And Juan says, I have an alibi. I was at Dodger Stadium watching the Dodgers play baseball. So the attorney goes to Dodger Stadium. They look at all the footage, right? Because there's a lot of cameras around a baseball field, a Major League Baseball field, and nothing. So the legal aid attorney says, I'm sorry, I can't find you that alibi, a picture of you at Dodger Stadium at the time the murder was committed. Juan Catalan eventually gets another attorney, apparently a better attorney. And this attorney says to him, look, you got to give me something. We checked out Dodger Stadium. There's nothing. And Juan says, you know what? I know that where I was sitting, they were filming something, maybe like a commercial or something. And then this skinny guy, bald, he goes down toward the field. He raises his hand, and he gets the crowd cheering. He says, I don't know what that was, but that's what I saw. So the attorney goes back to Dodger Stadium, Chavez Ravine, where the Dodgers play, and he says to them, were you guys or somebody filming in a certain section? Because obviously Juan Catalan knew where he was sitting. And he said, they told the attorney, yes, there was filming an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David's show. And I'll get into a little bit, hilarious episode. It's called The Carpool. You can just imagine. And they look at the footage, and they really don't see anything at first. But at the very end, after the episode was filmed, so they did all the filming, and at the end, Larry David, because he's a ham, he walks down toward the field. It's like box seats. He walks down toward the field, raising his hands. People are cheering. And at that moment, you see he was sitting behind a wall. Juan Catalan takes his daughter's hand, young kid, and walks past the camera. He said he was going to get ice cream with his daughter. If he didn't do that, first of all, if there was no filming of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and if Larry David didn't go down there after the filming, and if Juan Catalan didn't get up at that exact moment with his daughter to be captured on video, he would have certainly spent the rest of his life in jail, or at that time they had it, he would have gotten the death penalty. So the attorney put that together and some pinging with his phone to complete the alibi, because that proved he was at Dodger Stadium at a certain time. With the pinging, it showed he could not have committed that murder. So he was eventually set free. They interviewed the judge and they interviewed the prosecutor, and both of them swore up and down, and I believe it, he was guilty. They had no reason to believe the guy was innocent. Innocent to proven guilty, yes. But we have gut feelings sometimes. The woman who's killed is the witness who put his brother away. There are eyewitnesses, which eyewitness testimony is horrible unless you know the person, especially if it's between the races. So if a white person sees a black person or vice versa. And eyewitness testimony was used in this case, and it didn't go to trial yet. But if it had gone to trial and he didn't have an alibi and someone takes the stand like, that's the guy that shot Martha Puebla, guess what? He's convicted, right? He was cleared, and I don't know if they ever got the person who shot Martha Puebla. I hope so. But he was cleared, and Larry David is able to take credit for clearing a man from death row. Go to camera one for a second, Danny. Now what I'd like to do is get to My Cousin Vinny. It's an iconic movie. Most of us, if not all of us on this show tonight, have seen it. It's hilarious. I remember seeing it many, many years ago. I think it has so many lines. You know, you were serious about that? Things we can, just like when you watch The Godfather, there's certain, make him an offer you can't refuse. My Cousin Vinny, there's so many funny things that you remember and you take with you. And as a trial attorney, watching it is hilarious because I see the realities of it and I see the Hollywood script. So right now, my producer is going to show pictures or clips of the movie, not video clips, just pictures of the movie, and we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to tell you if there's some realism to it or not. So let's go to camera 2. So, Danny, if you can put up clip 1. Okay. That's not clip 1.
It is clip 1. It's very hard to get pictures of individual scenes specifically, so I thought this would be funny. It's the law book with him just head down, looking a little defeated on that
Okay.
one.
In the movie, Vincent LaGuardia Gambini is a graduate of Brooklyn Academy of Law, which doesn't exist. There's a Brooklyn Law School, but he said a Brooklyn Academy of Law. Took the bar, I think it was like 7 times. The 7th was a charm or something like that. Or 8th was a charm. And he finally passed the bar. He was practicing some personal injury, and now he's driving to Alabama with Mona Lisa Vito, his girlfriend, to represent his cousin and another man who are accused of killing a clerk, shot the clerk. To do that, he had to be admitted what they call pro hoc vice. It's Latin, basically for this purpose only, because he was not admitted in Alabama. Just like I'm admitted in New York, Connecticut, Washington, D.C. If I wanted to represent somebody in another state, I would have to be admitted pro hoc vice. Just like in the O.J. trial. Remember when a whole bunch of attorneys went down to California, went over to California, and were on his team. Most of them, Johnny Cochran was a California attorney, but most of them were not. New Yorkers or other states, Massachusetts. So it's a procedure that you have to show the court that you're competent, that you're well-versed in this area of the law, and that you're capable of handling this case. And they also question the defendant because they're going to say, look, we don't want you taking this guy on, and then when you're convicted, you're going to complain that you are not adequately represented. Because generally speaking, think about it. I always tell people, hire an attorney in the county where your case is, whether it's divorce, family court, murder, it doesn't matter. Because that attorney knows the judges. I know the judges, I know the players in Suffolk County. I don't even go to Nassau. Same with a murder trial. The certain judges that try these cases out in Riverhead, let's say in Suffolk County, Riverhead County Court. And you want an attorney that's known by these people. Sometimes there's an exception. I guess OJ wanted different talent from different places that fit the bill. So anyway, so Vinny had to convince Judge Chamberlain Haller that he was competent. And how did he do that? Remember how he did it, Danny? He lied.
Yeah, didn't he call himself Jack Gallo?
Well, no, but he said Jerry Gallo. Later on, it was Callo. But he said also he had a case of the. Actually, he used his first name and then he changed it later. And he said, I handled the Son of Sam case. I got that guy off, and then whatever. And the judge says, okay, and he hands him the book. That's what I thought the picture would be. He hands him the law book, which is on the table. And he says, and then Vinny says, this is it? Like, in other words, that's all I got to do? So, pro hoc vice means for this purpose only. Is that realistic? There's a little more to it than just showing up in the judge's chambers and being asked a couple of questions. So, does pro hoc vice exist? Absolutely. This is more Hollywood. It's like a short circuit of the process. So let's go to the second one. Okay, this is one of the funniest scenes in the movie where his friend thinks, Stan, that's the guy he's talking to in the movie, Billy is Ralph Macchio. Stan thinks he's there to have sex with him. He thinks he's just a prisoner and is trying to get off on these guys. And that wouldn't happen. I visit clients that are in jail, but you don't go to the jail cell. Maybe in other states you do. I don't think so. You go to a location within the jail, same as Yaphank in Suffolk County or Riverhead, and any other place. I went to Rikers, and it's a location. They bring the prisoners to that room. There's a procedure. There's an order to it. So what you're seeing here, I say wouldn't happen, not in a city or a large county. Maybe in a very small little town, but here this is like a penitentiary. So I don't think that would happen. It's not realistic. Probably one of the funniest parts of the movie that I recall, but not too realistic on this one. Let's go to the next one, which is the arraignment. Right? An arraignment is when first time pretty much the case is on, you're before the judge, and the judge is, how does your client plead? Remember in the movie, how does your client plead? Now, I think a first-year law student would understand you say not guilty. If you can't figure that out, you shouldn't be there. And he says, well, no, there was a misunderstanding. They thought they got arrested for boosting a can of tuna. And he's like, well, what are you saying? And he says, well, no, I'm just explaining. I don't want to hear it. Your next words better be guilty or not guilty, or I'm going to hold you in contempt. And Vinny doesn't get it until it's too late. And Haller says, I don't even want to hear you clear your throat. The next words out of your mouth will be guilty or not guilty. And then Vinny, what does Vinny say? You remember, Dan? He says, I think I get the point. And he says, no, I don't think you do. Meaning, you're now in contempt. I think it was $250. Because it's a very, very simple procedure. Even if your guy is on video killing 20 people, the answer is not guilty. You plead not guilty, and then you go to the next phase of the case, whether it be a hearing, whether it be a trial, whether it be a plea bargain, from there. So, not really realistic, only because you'd think he would know. Just say not guilty and get the heck out of there. So, again, that's really not realistic. If he thinks that, then that guy shouldn't even be handling any kind of case in a courtroom. So let's go to the next one. Vinny's opening statement, which is also hilarious, said everything that guy said is bullshit. Right. The opening statement is a chance, and it's not evidence. It's just a chance for the attorney to give a preview in a sense. Just like at the end it's a summation, a preview about the case. He doesn't do that. He just says everything he said is bullshit. Now, it's funny, not realistic, because that's your opportunity to tell the jury, because the prosecution goes first and last. So you want to, in a sense, say what the prosecution said is not correct, and this is why it's not correct. Now, you don't have to say everything. You don't have to show all your cards. The prosecution has to lay the foundation, has to talk about jurisdiction. I almost got a case dismissed because the prosecutor didn't talk about jurisdiction. You have to say, in the county of Suffolk, state of New York, this is what happened. And there's a thing. The defense attorney could say, I don't even want to make my statement now. I did that one time in a case where I said, I'll make my opening statement later. There was a reason why I decided to do that, because I didn't want to tip my hand too much. But that's out of the ordinary. Usually you do it. It worked in my case. All right. So in the movie, him saying that, not realistic. He should have said, my clients are not guilty. There's no evidence, or there's not enough evidence, or there was a misunderstanding. There he could have said it. My clients thought that they were getting arrested for stealing a can of tuna, and when they were asked, did you shoot the clerk? And he said, I shot the clerk? He wasn't saying he shot the clerk. He was responding like, what are you talking about? So again, that one really is not too realistic. Let's go to the next one. So Vinny goes back to the courtroom to quote. Before we get to that one, if you could put the Riley one up, and I'll talk about something before that.
The Riley one?
Yes, that's the with the two fingers up, Mrs. Riley and only Mrs. Riley.
Okay, yes.
If you have that.
Yeah.
But before that, one of the things that's not really realistic is how quickly this case went to trial. Sometimes you could think about the Gilgo Beach murder. This guy was arrested over a year ago, and the case still hasn't gone to trial. And I have many cases where it's not like the guy gets arrested, you plead not guilty, and you go to trial next week. That does not happen. No. All right, the prosecution needs time. The defense needs time. There could be hearings. There could be certain procedures that have to be carried out. There could be a hearing. We talked about MAP, Wade, identification hearing. Was he properly Mirandized? Is that statement going to come in? I once won a hearing, and the statement didn't come in. They still could go forward with the case because they have other stuff. But that was not realistic, that the case was handled so quickly. It was almost like, next Thursday we're going to go to trial. No, not realistic. Now, how many fingers am I holding up? In that scene, Vinny is questioning a woman with thick glasses who said she witnessed the crime from across the street in her porch. In fact, there's a scene where he's talking to her on the porch. And he questions her, and he says, well, actually, he has this like tape measure, and he goes to the back of the courtroom, and he said, how many fingers am I holding up? I believe he puts the 2 up at that time. And Judge Haller says, let the record reflect he's holding up 2 fingers. And he says, Your Honor, meaning, come on. And then he says, Mrs. Riley, and this is ad-libbed, I'm told, Mrs. Riley and only Mrs. Riley, and the judge's like, And she says 4, I think, and obviously she was wrong. And he said, you think you need new glasses? She said, yes. Because before that he said, you need new glasses? She said, no. A bit of a gamble. Because what if she said 2? Then what does he do? Try again? He puts up 3, and what if she says 3? He makes the case for her ability to see distances, because he said it was 50 feet, she saw 100. It's a gamble that I'm not so sure that I would take in such a way. There are other ways you probably could do it, okay? Like, instead of holding up the fingers, maybe he thinks that she might not be able to pick out something in the back of the courtroom. So what does that say? And then maybe she says, I can say, oh, it's only 50 feet, not 100. It is a gamble. It worked, and if it works, it's spectacular, right? But there, it's a gamble. And again, in my practice, I don't want to say gamble, but I've taken calculated risks. And generally they work out because I've given it some thought, and it's just not nilly-willy. I can call an audible, but I'm also mindful of how things can blow up in your face, right? So that's the one with 2 fingers up. Let's go to the one where, after that, Danny, there's a scene where Mona Lisa Vito is on the stand. That's his girlfriend. He called her as a witness. That's also a little unusual because she wasn't listed as a witness when the trial started, but she became a witness. And there's a whole thing to that as well. In the scene, he has a picture of tire tracks, because if you recall, he has an argument with her, and she's like, that's it, I'm out of here. And he's looking at pictures that she took, just for the sake of taking pictures, and he sees something in the tire tracks that shows him that their car couldn't have made those tire tracks. Very interesting. And the key to the case, that and something else. And he says to the judge, Judge, these are the tire tracks, a picture of the tire tracks? Yes, okay. And then he shows them to her. That would not happen that way. There's a procedure to introducing evidence, unless it's stipulated. So before, maybe it's stipulated, the prosecutor, look, I'm going to get this in. Do you stipulate that this is the tire track? Yes. Okay. Your Honor, it's already been marked exhibit, well, the prosecution would be 1, he'd be letters. So exhibit L. Defense would be letters. Exhibit L. But assuming it's not, you have to lay the foundation. And the prosecutor might not want to do that, especially with Vinny, because he figures he can't get this into evidence. He doesn't even know what he's doing. And I probably, as a prosecutor, would say, I'm not stipulating. So he says to the judge here, it comes in, not realistic. You'd have to say, I'm having this marked as Exhibit L for identification. Okay. Ms. Vito, what you might show it to her, not in evidence yet, after it's been marked, and then say, what is that? That's a picture of blah, blah, blah. How do you know that? Who took, maybe you have to put the person who took the picture, which happened to be her, but you might have to do that. And there's a whole procedure. It's like 5 or 6 questions you have to go through before something comes into evidence. So there, they short-circuited it, and I don't believe it was stipulated because they would have said it. Your Honor, this is stipulated that comes into evidence. And we do that all the time to speed the trial up. Okay? So that was key to the case, because then she said, he said, did their car make those tire tracks? No, the defense is wrong. And they looked upset. But it was a good thing, because it showed that their car, did their car make those tire tracks? No, because it had independent suspension. She goes into the whole thing, which is great. 50, they didn't make it in 50 whatever. So that part could be realistic. That's what experts do. But, to have the girlfriend not on the list all of a sudden come out and testify to these things, and the prosecutor was pretty quick to pull back and say she's good. because he doesn't know anything about her. Usually you have to have the curriculum vitae, or the person has to establish themselves as an expert. Now, he said general automotive, so maybe he was able to get away with it. In the real world, maybe you could. But again, that's up to the judge. Okay, let's show the picture. We said she's on the stand as the witness. That's a little unusual. Okay, let's go to the last picture, Dan. All right. In the movie, after Mona Lisa Vito testifies and pretty much blows their whole case apart, what does Vinny do? He calls to the stand the expert, and he says, she's cute, right? And he says, yes, very. That'd be kind of silly. But you're taking a gamble by doing that, because you've already showed the jury, based on her testimony, which she's not the expert like the other guy was, but kind of blows the case wide open. Now, what would have happened if Vinny calls this witness and says everything she said is accurate, and he says no? That's a problem. You're taking that gamble. Now, the prosecutor could call the expert as a rebuttal witness, which is probably what would have happened. But you're taking a gamble by calling the other side's witness. Just like when he called Sheriff Farley. And, again, very unusual that the defense attorney would call back to the stand the cop, in this case the sheriff, that kind of put the nail in his coffin. He admitted, I shot the clerk. It's a movie. It's interesting. Like, I've called cops as witnesses or used them as rebuttal witnesses, but you got to be careful because you know who they work for. So if you're calling a witness a criminal case, you better be damn sure that you got something that cop can't just speak freely and say something contradicting what you're saying.
The prosecution did have an expert, that guy that...
Yes, and Vinny used him later. Remember I just said, he called him back to the stand. Now that's a bit of a gamble because...
But could the prosecution later on call him back to the stand and
yes.
be like, I have some questions that I want to clarify?
Yes, it's called a rebuttal. You're calling him to rebut what Mona Lisa Vito... So let's say Mona Lisa Vito gets up there and says things that are not accurate. Let's just say. The prosecutor could say to his expert, what that woman just said, and in the movie you see them talking, and then the judge is like, come on guys, if the expert said to the prosecutor, yes, everything she said is accurate, the prosecutor's not putting the guy back on the stand. But if he said, what she's saying is not accurate, she said it was metallic, it was made, that color was made by this, and assuming the expert knows that, he might not know what paint Ford or whatever has, the Corvette made and what colors. But if he did and he said what she's saying is not right, the prosecutor could put him up as a rebuttal witness and say, you heard everything that Mona Lisa Vito says. Is it accurate? No, it's not accurate. And then the jury would have to decide. When we're talking about that, who decides? The jury. The jury's going to say, we believe this expert. I call it battle of the experts. Do you believe this guy or do you believe Mona Lisa Vito? In the movie, the expert came around, right? And and then Sheriff Farley, yes, we found a .457 Magnum, or we found two boys that matched that description in another county. And anything else? Yes, on them they had, the .457, 357 Magnum on them. Okay, so that was it. Now, the point I was making is then the prosecutor, remember, Danny? I want to drop all charges. That would not happen like that. If I was the prosecutor, I'd say, wait a minute, Your Honor, can we have a continuance? I have to look into these things.
It did seem like he conceded pretty quickly.
He did. And that's the movie, because if you said, all right, 2 weeks later, they found, it would kind of ruin the funniness of the movie, where they're hugging the judge and all this stuff outside of the probate. You see the door? It said probate office. So that really wouldn't be realistic. I think the prosecutor would say, Your Honor, I need a continuance. I need to verify some of these things. Let's test the ballistics on the gun. Is that the round that killed Jimmy Willis? Remember the movie?
They didn't do that in the movie?
No. You heard nothing about... It was the gun, the caliber of the gun. But I'm saying, if I'm the prosecutor, my case is falling apart, and I hear two of the boys that match that description, because if I dismiss charges, I just can't nilly-willy bring them back. It could be declared a mistrial. Those kids walk. And then I find out the two boys that were captured, their gun, or the ballistics, didn't match up with the ballistics on the murder of Jimmy Willis. That's the guy, the clerk, sack of suds.
I have a question. How
Yes.
often is it that because I would have thought that right off the bat they would have said, all right, let's get the bullet, let's compare it with the gun that these boys have. I would have thought that would have been the first step, because wouldn't that have been maybe
The problem
means
is
for no trial?
they didn't find the weapon. So even if they said this is the round that did it, they didn't find the weapon at that point of the movie. So they couldn't link it. It wasn't like when they caught Billy and Stan, they had the Magnum on them. And then they could say, well, that's the ballistics match. There was no gun. They didn't have a gun.
Mm-hmm.
So ballistics really wasn't relevant, because even if they say, okay, it was a Magnum, 357 Magnum that did it, they couldn't link it to those two boys.
I have a question. This
Yes.
just popped up. What if okay, so as you know, a 357 Magnum, it has the cylinder, so the shell doesn't discharge. What if there was a shell on the floor? Could that
On the
if you
floor
were-
where?
of the convenience store, implying that the gun being fired may not have been a revolver, because a regular handgun,
Right, but
you know.
but again, you still have to tie it to these two boys.
But I was saying, as a defense attorney, is that something that you'd be like, well, there's a shell on the floor and my guy has a revolver? You know,
Well,
a
if
revolver,
if they caught him with a revolver, and yeah, of course you're going to try to. A defense attorney's job is to create doubt, not necessarily to solve the crime. This is not Perry Mason, right? My job is to say who did it. It's just that my guy didn't do it beyond a reasonable doubt. Remember the movie Scarface?
of course.
And he's in the attorney's offices after he gets caught laundering money, and the guy says, "I'm an expert at creating doubt." That's what a defense attorney has to do. A prosecutor has to prove his case beyond a reasonable doubt. He can't speculate. Say, it's likely that guy did it. No, he did it beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense attorney doesn't have to say somebody else did it beyond a reasonable doubt. My guy didn't do it. Just create doubt, you win a case. In fact, we're going to have a little time. I'm going to talk about a case, spoofing, we'll get to in a second. Do you have any other questions about My Cousin Vinny, Dan? Or does anybody in the audience have any questions?
That was one of the things I was thinking about. If I
Oh,
was,
wait a second. Let me just go. Christopher, my cousin, I think I get the point. No, you don't. Fred Gwynn's last movie. Yeah. In fact, I'm glad Robert brought that up. So number 11 in my list. The movie was great. Great, fun acting. Marissa Tomei won an Academy Award. Fred Gwynn, to a large extent, along with Marissa Tomei, and made that movie. And he was almost like the straight man, because the faces he made, the accent that he had, how he treated him, like, I don't think you do. Or the face he made when Vinny said, oh, no, when, the chess set, when he knocked over the chess pieces, no, it's Jerry Callow. And then the judge's like, oh, okay. The faces he made, the things he said, hilarious. And I think it was one of his finest roles. I know he was in The Munsters and Car 54, Where Are You? I'm dating myself. Probably a little before my time, but I know what that is. It was a great, great role, and he was phenomenal. He was phenomenal. I love the movie. I think it's one of the funniest movies that I've seen. And you don't have to be a lawyer to enjoy the movie. Just a fun movie. Some of the things in there were realistic, like when he was questioning the hillbilly and he says, he's showing what are these, trees, and how did you see it? Well, that's what you got to do. You got to shake their credibility. So when a witness testifies, you have to have questions to try. If you can't do it, don't question the witness. But if you could say that woman, about her eyesight, your glasses are pretty thick, right? You can go there and say, did you have your glasses on? Did you? But you don't want to make the other side's, you don't want to make the prosecution's case. But if you have a witness, and I've had my way with some witnesses, where they're shaky. They're shaky, and you can go after them.
in the movie, the way that he went after the witnesses, is that, I guess, do they really give you like free reign like that?
They give you a lot of leeway in cross-examination. Absolutely. All right. It has to be relevant. You can't say, well, when you were 10, didn't you know? It has to be relevant. But like he was saying, oh, you made your, not gruel, well, what did he say? That southern food. He was saying grits. And how long did it? Oh, it took me 5 minutes. Oh, okay. And see how he set him up? He said, okay, I know that. You said 5 minutes. And then he says, well, how long does a grit take or something along? And in the grit eating world, it takes 15 minutes and it took you 5. He's starting to shake his credibility.
Yeah,
and that's
I like
what
that
you have
line.
to.
He's like, "Are you telling me
Right,
outside
right.
of the
And then,
universe?"
did you get
your
those
grits
beans
cook?"
where Jack got the magic beans from? And objection, because then you're going overboard. But you're allowed to go after them. I don't like to raise my voice when I question somebody, but I use it because if you're always angry, isn't it true? You're not going to really gain the favor of the jury. So you start out almost making the witness a friend. Hi, how are you? Is it true that you were sitting on your, you know what I mean? Like you ease them into it, because if you start with your backup questioning a witness, they're going to have their backup. Right? But if you go at them, in a sense, matter of fact, say, isn't it you? So let me just so I'm clear, you were on the deck, yes, and then you heard a shot and you looked, or whatever, yes, okay, and then what did you see next? Or what were the conditions? Like Lincoln, what did Lincoln do? How did you see it? Oh, it was the light of the moon. He set him up, he set the stage, and then he went beyond that with the proof that the guy was lying or mistaken. Right? But if the guy's saying it was a full moon, obviously he's lying. It wasn't a full moon. So an excellent litigator also can know certain things about people. You try it as best you can. Okay, this is a tough guy, so he's going to try to match my toughness. Or this is a soft guy, so I don't want to intimidate him just yet. Or this woman believes this, so whatever the case might be. You always go at the witness and in a way, and sometimes you don't score big points, but even a couple of points here and a couple of points there, in your closing, Danny, when you make your closing statement, you could say, remember that guy said this, but then when I questioned him, he said that. Remember this one said this, and you're trying to lead the jury down a path of, I have my doubts. Maybe the guy did it, but you know what? I have reasonable doubt. Anything else before we leave the My Cousin Vinny movie? Anything, Dan?
No, I think that was...
Okay, let me just see if anything... a quit typo. Oh, that's Richard. If the gloves, don't fit, you must acquit. And sometimes, and I like that, Richard, thank you, where you say things at a trial. Like I remember one time I had a trial. I was in my 20s. I won my first felony trial. It was a bank robbery, or actually it was money stolen from a bank. So it wasn't a bank robbery in a sense. It was money taken after it had left the bank. It wasn't federal, it was state. And I remember saying, where's the beef? Because back then, that was the big commercial. Where's the beef? I said, reasonable doubt, you could drive a truck through it. Because you want the jury to go back in that jury room and remember what Phil Jusino said more than what the prosecutor said. Because I want to carry the day. If I don't carry the day, there's a good chance my guy will be convicted. Richard Rose Utes, that was another one. 2 Utes. What's a Ute? Funny. I think I get the point. Acquit, must have, the typo. Okay. So we're going to leave My Cousin Vinny, iconic movie. If you haven't seen it, see it. I hope when you see it, I didn't ruin it for you. Because you're going to say, well, Phil said that's not real. It's a movie. We all know it's Hollywood, right? My favorite, I got to say, my favorite courtroom drama is A Few Good Men. I think many of you could probably agree with that. The Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson. Unbelievable. And the other witnesses, too. Just a great, great movie. I want to put myself in that scene where he's questioning him. And remember, they're like, don't go after him because you could be punished if you question in a certain way or you accuse an officer of lying. There's the military code of conduct. So you have to really be careful how you go after a witness. It's just different than me going after a witness. But that's a great movie. So the funniest, My Cousin Vinny, if you haven't seen it, watch A Few Good Men. Just even go to the end of the movie. You really want the backstory. But a hilarious, hilarious movie, My Cousin Vinny. Very serious movie, A Few Good Men. But the Tom Cruise was phenomenal in it. And I'm not, I like Tom Cruise. He's good. I like All the Right Moves. That was a good movie. But in this, and even Kevin Bacon, just so you know, Kevin Bacon is a Marine Corps. In fact, I went through boot camp. I was going to be a JAG officer, Marine Corps. Tom Cruise was a naval officer representing, in this case, Marines. So Kevin Bacon is a Marine prosecuting Marines, and that's why Jack Nicholson said, your girly white uniform. Because, we used to joke around that, the Navy was a bit slack compared to the Marines, a tougher bunch of guys. That was just a joke back then. But if you see the movie, watch the movie. The end of the movie was phenomenal. Go ahead, Dan.
I have a question about this. Kind of reflects about what's recently that astronaut Kelly. I forget his name. One of the twins.
Basically, telling servicemen to disregard lawful orders.
Well, no, unlawful orders. That was what he was saying. He was saying
but I'm saying still an order that all orders are deemed lawful when they're given.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't think the Code Red was a lawful order.
Right. But they denied that.
What I'm saying is, I don't know the outcome of what happened after that. After he basically admitted.
They tried to prosecute him, and they weren't able to. The DOJ didn't prosecute him. They didn't indict him.
What, in the movie?
No, in real life. I'm saying with Kelly.
No. I'm talking about in the movie.
Okay.
How the two boys, the two soldiers, the Code Red, they killed the guy. What if they, what happens after that?
Right.
The commander, Jack Nicholson admits he gave the order.
I'll tell you.
So what happens at that point?
In the movie, they were convicted of conduct unbecoming an officer, which was a lot less than murder. So these guys are probably not going to go to jail. They were just discharged, a dishonorable discharge. And that's why he said you don't have to have a badge. You don't have to have a medal on you, whatever, to be a hero or something like that at the end of the movie. There's an officer on deck, and he does the salute. What would happen is those guys get dishonorably discharged. They go home. It affects the rest of their lives, right? Going for a job, you decide, and you killed somebody. They're going to have a tough life, right? Jack Nicholson admitted in open court that he ordered the Code Red. You're damn right I did, right? So he can't now take that back. They could charge him with murder, a murder conspiracy with him and Kendrick. I think the guy was named Kendrick. The guy under him, and they could be charged with conspiracy to commit murder because they ordered a Code Red. Now they didn't order him to be killed, but they ordered the Code Red. Also, they can be prosecuted for lying in court, perjury, because they said they didn't, and then he said I did, and that's how Tom Cruise got him. And he was also said he had two guys sitting there about the log books were doctored, and there was something there too. But he got him to admit. So he's going to be prosecuted. The other guy under him is going to be prosecuted. Their careers are done. Worse than the other guys because they're just going to go home and have to get a job doing something, but they're going to have a tough time. But that's what would happen.
Yeah, okay. I never really fleshed out what would be the end of that because I mean it's a dramatic ending. He kind of admits, but so if he didn't open up his mouth, would they be able to have anything on him in that?
No, because who else was going to say it? Nobody. They all stuck together, right? Even the guy that the two Marines that got charged. One was like the small guy, and the other one was the big guy. Mm-hmm. Well, the small guy testified, and he said he ordered the Code Red. And then they proved that he wasn't even there. Remember, he said, we made it back in, like 15 minutes or whatever. He didn't even hear it. And that was why Tom Cruise was very upset with Demi Moore. Because he said, he wasn't even there to hear it. And remember, he was drunk and he was upset because he figured that was the end of the case. Because at least they had this guy saying, I heard it. Now, whether you believe the guy or not, he's on trial for his life. You might not believe him. Just like when a defendant testifies. I didn't do it. You don't have to believe him, right? So that's what happened. Very quickly, in the last 4 minutes, I just want to talk about a trial that I had. I call it the spoofing trial. I had a client who was accused of threatening another individual. There was a tape. It wasn't a good tape. It was almost like one of the Gotti tapes where, it's like muffled, but there was a threat. And I got the case, and I said to my client, did you make that phone call? He said, no, I didn't. The prosecution subpoenaed the complaining witness's records. That's the guy who claims he was threatened. And the record showed that my guy made a phone call to that number. So I get on the phone, I call my guy, I'm a little upset. And I said, be honest with me, did you make the call? He said, no, I didn't. So I'm like, okay. It was almost like in My Cousin Vinny Howler. I was like, okay, I see records here that say you made the call, you said you didn't. So I subpoenaed his records. And it came back, no call was made. So now I'm like, wait a minute. I'm looking at my left hand, call was made. My right hand, no call made. So I said to the prosecutor, you can't win. There's reasonable doubt right here. Phone records, and these are not my records, these are records from a carrier that were subpoenaed. And he had his subpoena. So I said, you can't go forward. He says, I'm going to go forward. Okay. So we pick a jury. We go forward. The guy gets on the stand. He made the threat. There was like a family relationship, in-law type. And he said he made the call. I recognized the voice. That's him. The DA got the records in that was subpoenaed. And then it was my turn. And I got those records in, and I questioned him. And before we get to the verdict, it turns out that about 20 years earlier, I represented the complaining witness in a case. I won't say even what type of case it is. Not that people are listening and know what I'm talking about. But one time, I was with a firm, and I went down there one time. He recognized me. He told the prosecutor, they say to the judge, we want you seeing him off the case. There's a conflict of interest. I said, what, are you kidding me? I don't even know this guy. I don't remember him. I ran down to the clerk and realized I had appeared one time. I still didn't remember the guy, but I did. So I said, Judge, it doesn't matter. There's no conflict of interest. I don't even remember the guy, and I'm not going to be questioning him about what he was charged with and why I was representing him at that time. Judge allowed me to stay in the case. Then a supervisor came down, who I'd been in the office with, and he said, no, Phil has to get off the case. The judge said, I'm going to repeat myself. Phil's staying on the case. I stayed on the case. I got a not guilty verdict, and that was it. The jury said there was reasonable doubt, which is what I said from day one after I saw the records, and that was the end of it. So with a minute to go, I just want to talk about very quickly. I wrote a book called Divorce, A Practical Guide. This is divorce. We did all things criminal, but I wrote a book about divorce. I also do a heavy-duty matrimonial and family court. It's a great read. You can get it on Amazon.com. Also, if you like my show, you can like it. You comment. I appreciate the people who commented, and I'll try to respond to those later on tonight. And follow, like, share. You can share it so other people can hear what the show is all about. So I want to really thank you for watching the show tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were entertained. I hope you learned something. I think you did. I know Danny did, right?
Absolutely.
And Danny knows quite a bit about criminal law because he and I have these discussions frequently. So thanks for watching. Every Wednesday at 7 p.m., Facebook Live. If you miss a show, don't worry about it. You can see it. It's on Facebook. It won't be live, but you'll be able to see it. Right, Danny?
Yes.
All you got to do is go to my feed, and you'll see the show. All right? So listen, you have a great night. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Dan Jusino, my producer, content creator, and producer. Have a good night. Thank you.